In Napoleon Hill's timeless classic, Think and Grow Rich, he defines a mastermind group as the coordination of knowledge and effort between two or more people for the attainment of a definite purpose. In this podcast, that coordination is created between you, me, and our amazing guests. Our definite purpose is achieving extraordinary results in your business and your life. I'm your host, Brad Mulvey. Welcome to the Millennial Mastermind Podcast. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Millennial Mastermind Podcast, the show for entrepreneurial millennials who are looking for the tools, tactics, and inspiration to take your business and your life to the next level. Congratulations for making an investment in yourself today, that being an investment of your most valuable resource, your time, by tuning into this podcast. I do not take that commitment lightly, and I can guarantee that today you're going to see a positive ROI on that investment. And that has very little to do with me and everything to do with today's amazing guest, Erik Seversen. Erik is a writer, speaker, adventurer, educator, and entrepreneur who refuses to let others tell him what he can or cannot do. This way of thinking stems back to when he was rejected from his dream school, UCLA, and turned that setback into a challenge. He excelled in community college and got into UCLA 2 years later, where he graduated near the top of his class. And that's just the very tip of the spear with Erik. If you take a look at his resume of life experiences, you will hardly believe that one person could accomplish everything that he's done. Just to list a few of these experiences, Erik has traveled to over 80 countries, been to 49 of the 50 states, ridden a motorcycle on 6 continents, and crossed the USA twice on motorcycle, had a machine gun stuck in his mouth in Nigeria, summited the tallest mountains of 8 countries and 5 states, lived with a remote Indian tribe deep in the Amazon, helped grow a company from 7 million to over 100 million in 10 years as the VP of International Business Development, and written a book, Ordinary to Extraordinary, An Average Person's Adventurous Search for Meaning, which comes out in March of 2018. These are just a few of the amazing accomplishments, and I'm sure we'll cover some more, but Erik's journey really personifies the idea of living life with intention. He uses entrepreneurial success formulas and motivational materials in business, but he's also pioneering their use in the field of education. And it is for all of those reasons, and many more that I'm sure we'll get into here, that I am thrilled to say, Erik Seversen, welcome to the podcast.
Brad, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, we are thrilled to have you here as well. And as I was doing some research and learning a little bit more about you, the more I read, the less I could believe how much you've done in your life and all the cool experiences you've had. So formulating some questions, it's like where to even begin. But I guess for starters, is there anything that I left out of that absolutely wild bio that you would like to elaborate on?
Not really, but a little bit. So, it's kind of funny that one of the main reasons all of those things happened is because I just opened doors. And these are the same doors that are open to a lot of people through my travels. I did them myself. I figured out a way to pay for them myself. I wasn't entitled in any way for someone to help me and make these things happen easily. And also, all of that developed when I was a younger person from 16 to 30 years old, when Generation X was a bad word, when Generation Xers were considered the slackers of the nation. And so it's kind of great to have kind of forged my unique path with all that kind of like almost lazy negative connotation of a non-focused Generation Xer. And here I am now looking at, myself and a lot of my peers who have done extremely successful things in their lives.
Yeah, so many millennials are used to hearing those, some of those words that you threw out there, cast our direction, so it's pretty funny. But clearly, travel and adventure are driving factors in your life. Where did those interests come from, or when did you start developing interest in the more adventurous side of your personality?
It kind of goes down to when I was younger, I always wanted to look around the next corner is something I've said often. Like if I go into the end of the block, I had to peek around to see what was there. In the woods at the end of my neighborhood, I had to peek behind to see what was there. And I always just wanted to see what was right behind the next thing. But something that comes to mind as you ask that question is I was 17 years old, 16 or 17, and I decided I wanted to ride my bicycle from, I lived up in Washington at the time. I'm in LA now. I wanted to ride my bicycle from Washington to California, from Tacoma to Los Angeles. And my parents let me go, partially because a friend of mine 5 years older was starting the trip, at least with me. And on that trip, at the speed of a pedal bike, going from Washington to California, slowly passing through people, in farms and houses and in cities. It allowed me a lot of time to think. And the guy that was traveling with me made it halfway. He was in the military reserve, so he had to go back to the Marine Corps for his training, so he couldn't finish the trip with me. And it was the last half of that trip when I was alone for about a week. I think I was 18 at the time, discovering what it was like to travel, to be scared when it becomes dark, not knowing where I'm going to sleep yet. And I usually had a tent with me, and I slept outside every single night, except for a few of my parents' friends that lived on the road twice. And that discovering myself as I was passing through and seeing all these different different people and different scenes really did a lot for me. And it's kind of funny that it was also at a hiker-biker campground that I was staying at, that it was just me as a little kid on my pedal bike, and the next two camp slots were filled up with a group of outlaw bikers with all the same patch of big yellow, red, and winged skull on the back. And I ended up joining their group. They walked over to my campfire basically and asked if they could barbecue a hot dog with me, which is awesome. And so that was also the first day of my life that I wanted to have a Harley Davidson, which ended up to be a big part of my life. But so that trip really gave me the idea of freedom of the road, the on the road feeling, and it never left, and it expanded into the whole globe.
Wow, yeah, that's quite the experience to have when you're just 18 there. And so that was like a 2-week trip for you?
Yep, it was 1,200 miles in 14 days.
And would you say that just sort of ignited that travel bug within you that never quite died out afterwards?
Oh, it absolutely did. And then the more places I went, the more I wanted to see the next place. So, and you know what? They were, like I said, the doors open to me. I wanted to go to Africa. So and the reason is I read this book by Chinua Achebe called Things Fall Apart, and it didn't say anything similar to what I was learning in my geography and history classes in high school. And so I decided I want to see what it's all about for myself. Mowed lawns for 8 months, and made enough money to get to London. I hitchhiked from London to Zaire, which is now the Republic of Congo. And so wanting to explore one thing, Europe, then made me want to go to see more, going down into Africa. And then from there, it just kept going and going and going until I've, like you said, blanketed about 80 countries. But it's important to know that it wasn't just a vagabond exploration of the world, which is awesome, by the way. I love that too. But I kind of took it as a study of myself, a study of culture, a study of places. And so it really was adding to who I was all this whole time, rather than just passively going to check off different countries.
Yeah. And I think that's really important that you note that, because that's not something that many of us think about. At least I wasn't thinking about when I was in my younger years of looking at things rather than just from checking it off the bucket list or having these experiences as actually an educational experience and learning about yourself and others. So while you were going through that process of learning yourself and exploring the world, what was your mindset in terms of being very intentional about the trips and the places you were seeing and the people you were meeting along the way? How were you intentionally taking those experiences and making sure that you were learning from them?
The intentional part was just the eagerness and the curiosity to absorb everything I could. But the byproduct was really wild. And I mentioned about becoming dusk and not knowing where I was going to sleep. That was even more pronounced in Africa, where it would be getting dark. I walked large sections, like sometimes 60 miles in a row. And so it's getting dark. I don't know where I'm going to sleep yet. I'm entering a village or a small town and don't know a person, of course. I don't know how I'm going to be received. And there was this major fear, like I was excited but scared of, where am I going to sleep tonight? How are these people going to treat me? Is anything bad going to happen? And over and over, having that really kind of scared nervousness entering different villages and things turned into a major positive, because then in business, it translated to when I'm walking towards an important interview, for example, or if I'm entering a big negotiation, a powerful meeting, for example, and I start to get that sense of anxiety, I take a deep breath and I realized, you know what, just like back in Africa, that nervousness or that fear can be translated into positive energy. And I show up, fight or flight, ready to top of my game. And if I don't remind myself of translating the fear into positive energy, it's just fear, and I might stumble and I lose my train of thought. But when I translate that into positive energy, I'm confident, go in, and it's worked over and over and over again, just reminding myself of that.
Well, do you have any thoughts on how some of us who haven't had those experiences of walking into an African village, not knowing anybody at sundown, how can others use that feeling? Because I know exactly what you're talking about, and I'm sure the listeners do too, of walking into a big meeting and having that nervousness and what can initially be perceived as fear starting to overcome you, and you feel it in your stomach. And how can other people who haven't had those wild experiences take that fear-based emotion and do exactly what you're talking about of turning it into positive energy that can actually benefit you in that situation?
One quick thing that comes to mind is we've become so comfortable with our cell phones, with our tablets, with our computers, that communicating and approaching people, connecting people on LinkedIn or following somebody on Twitter, these are such easy things for us because we're so comfortable with it. One thing I suggest is go into a Starbucks tomorrow. Look at somebody who's sitting alone and look at somebody who you think that you'd really want to talk with, somebody that you think looks really cool. Go up and ask them something. Just getting over the fear of connecting with somebody face to face without a real reason. And, make up a reason, whether it be, hey, I need directions to this place. Can you help me? Make that a start. Or whatever it is, think of something that you can approach somebody with, and you're going to feel a tingle, especially if somebody that you really look like you'd like to have a conversation with that could be intimidating to you. The opposite sex actually is if you're not in a relationship, the opposite sex is a great person for this, because as soon as you see somebody of the opposite sex who's really attractive to you, your heartbeat's going to pound a little bit more, your stomach's going to feel a little bit more light, and you're going to force yourself to go up and talk to this person, not caring about the consequences. You don't really care if you get a date or something with this person. You're just caring about you overcoming your fear and breaking that boundary and saying something to them, whether it lasts 10 seconds as they say, I'm busy with my coffee, please leave, or they say, hey, yeah, great, let's, and it turns into a small conversation that could lead to something else.
Right. And at that point, it's just getting in the reps, right? You're just getting that practice. So the next time when maybe the stakes are a bit higher, you've already felt that feeling of fear or anxiety or whatever that may be for you personally, and you've already overcome it. So you just can go back to that time when you successfully did it and learn from that to apply to other situations.
Yeah, and something I read in one of Timothy Ferriss's books, which is kind of fun, is when you're at Starbucks, you're ordering your $2.25 double espresso, negotiate, say, hey, could I get a discount on this? For no reason at all. And just asking for something with no reason at all, for me at least, and I think for a lot of people, is scary. And it's this inconsequential little tiny thing about asking for a quarter off of my Starbucks coffee for no reason at all, and chances are they're going to say no, but they might. But at least you've broken that fear of negotiating with them. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I think that there's a lot of easy ways you can implement in your life and just get comfortable with being uncomfortable is what it comes down to.
Absolutely, Brad.
So I know that you're also an avid mountain climber, and we talked a little bit in the intro about how you've summited the tallest peaks in 8 countries and 5 different states. Anything you've learned in that, in mountain climbing that's translated over to your success in business?
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't it's kind of hard to imagine even some of my business successes without having the struggles on the mountains, because some of them were easy. In Belgium, for example, it's kind of a bump on the side of a road, but other ones are pretty major. Mount Rainier, for example, up in Washington is a big one. Zugspitze in Germany is a big one. And so when I'm on the mountain, especially ones that require technical skills a little bit, being roped to somebody and having them go up, I'm going to use one of my Mount Rainier trips for an example. It was a really bad year for conditions, and so the route we had to take was way different from the standard routes up Mount Rainier, roped together with 3 different people. We had to assist each other multiple times across small sections of about 50 feet, whether it's really a gnarly grade with a crevasse below us. And I've got pictures of these, so if any of your listeners want to check it out, it's ericseversen.com/millennial. And that's my landing page for you guys. And I'll put a few pictures of these climbs so you can see what I'm talking about. So anyway, again, their fear comes in, but we're assisting each other. We have to screw an ice screw into the wall to make sure my friend who's coming behind me is supported by the rope. We're exhausted to the point of wanting to quit, but knowing we don't really want to quit and keep on going on. And we draw that motivation to keep going from really unique places. You think of all the things that are important to you. The non-important things fade away when you're 72 hours into a climb and absolutely exhausted. And then you reach the summit, and it's just, that elation that happens, and then you've still got the trip down. So it's so hard that when I'm having a challenge in business every once in a while, similar to being scared, I just think to myself, man, on the mountain, I overcame that. This really isn't that big of a deal. So the challenges somehow seem more in perspective and a lot smaller than sometimes I think they are.
Right. Yeah. And I think that you can draw some of that experience, whether you're a climber or not. If you've ever worked out or done anything physically challenging, just remember those times that you really wanted to give up, but your body pushed further than you thought it could. And I think that's a great example.
Absolutely. And I think just keeping the body focused, I really believe in the mind-body connection is important. Somebody asked, Rick Branson, I think they said, what's a key to success? And he said, exercise. and it really is true that some of my best thoughts are when I'm jogging, I'm walking, I'm climbing a mountain, I'm hiking. So often if I'm working on a problem and I'm kind of stuck a little bit, I'll just leave my office, leave my house, and go for a 2-mile walk. And more than not, I'll be able to see whatever I was struggling with a little bit more clearly. And it's partially because the oxygen going through your body, and partially because you're, thinking. You've got time to think, and you're not focusing on it. So yeah, I love exercise.
So one of the other experiences that I mentioned in the intro was that you had a gun pointed in your face, a machine gun. What was that experience? Can you share that story and maybe what you learned from that?
Yeah, definitely. So this is when I was 20 years old. I'm hitchhiking from London to Zaire. I'm going across the border from Benin into Nigeria. And for this, to get across the border, I had to go in a shared taxi. So it's me and 5 other people crammed inside this tiny little car. We get through the border crossing, and that was absolutely a nightmare by itself. It was just it was like a maze of plywood planks and mud and people trying to get bribes. And I had $50 stolen from me by one person at the declarations form, counting how much money I had on me. And by the way, I was spending less than $50 a month, and he takes 50 of my $200 left. So then once we cross the border, I think, okay, that's the problem of the day. That was a bummer, but here we go. About 150 yards later, there's another checkpoint. And so the guys come out, and they see me, which is, the only non-African in the car. They get out of the car, go through all my stuff. They want a little bribe sometimes they didn't. And so then there's another checkpoint a mile away, another checkpoint. So then finally the cab driver decides, I've had enough of this. We've spent literally 3 hours stopping and me being searched. He decides he's not stopping. So when we hit the checkpoint, he gunned the motor of the car. One guy runs out and throws a spiked board across the front of the road. Another guy is running behind us, shooting his gun in the air, yelling something. So of course we have to stop. There's a spike board down in front of us. We slide to a stop. Now the guns they're pointed at all of us, but they immediately make me get out of the car, take me into a hut. And the guy literally put his gun. He's yelling at me now. I'm sitting on the floor of a hut, dirt floor, and he's yelling at me that I'm a spy. Why didn't we stop at the checkpoint now? And I'd been speaking French for, I don't know, a month and a half or so in Northern Africa mostly. And now in Nigeria, English is their common language. And so he's yelling at me in pidgin English, and I'm answering in bad French because I'm in shock. So then he continued to say, why don't you answer him in English? You're a spy. So he held me with a gun. In fact, at one point, he actually put the gun inside my mouth. I could taste the gunpowder of the tip of his gun in my mouth as I'm sitting there, not knowing what to do, panicking, frozen. And in the end, he let me go, decided I wasn't a spy. He wanted a bribe. But it kind of didn't end there. He stole my tent. Made me set it up to show him how it works before I left. And then we get back in the taxi. We finally make it into Lagos, and I'm starting to panic a little bit just because the city was really a lot of poverty, a lot of whenever our car would slow down, people would run next to it and put their hands on the car kind of out of curiosity because I was in it. We finally get to this car park, which was the bus station, whatever, and get out. And then the taxi cab driver wants me to give him a bribe to get my pack out of the back of his trunk. I gave him every cent I had left other than the 150 stashed into my boxer shorts. Then one of the guys from the car that was in the car with me walks over and he says, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "I'm going to go to a bank, get out of Lagos as quickly as I can." And he just shook his head and he says, "Today's Sunday. The banks are closed." And he told me that he hadn't been home in 5 years. And he said, "But if I don't take you home with me, you'll be dead before morning." And so I followed him. I didn't have any choice. I thanked him and followed him. And then in the end, he dumped me off at a friend's house whom he also hadn't seen in 5 years. And the friend accepted me in after him telling the story of what had happened. And in the end, I had a beautiful 3 days with this friend of him. He had a family, a wife, and 3 little kids, and they fed me almost nonstop all day long. They talked, we told stories, and it was just this beautiful, beautiful time. And that kind of started off one of my life mottos, which is things work out. From this horrible, worst case scenario almost, came this beautiful episode. And so when I remember Lagos, I have great, great memories that outweigh the negativity that I felt that day.
Wow, yeah, and it's almost a story of perseverance. I mean, I hear that, and it's hard for me even to imagine just the emotions that you would be feeling going through that, and it's scary just to hear about, and not to mention to actually go through. But the fact that you kept persevering and kept moving forward. A, you didn't really have too much of an option, but B, that's what life is sometimes, is just kind of pushing through those experiences and then eventually catching a break and having a beautiful experience on the end, I think is a great combination of that experience.
Yeah, and it's funny because I want to turn to fear again. It's almost like it's becoming a theme. So literally, this happened in, I think it was November. And then the following January, I'm back at the community college I was going to. This is Green River College, which is absolutely amazing school. Green River College changed my life for the positive and helped me get into UCLA, like you mentioned. And so now I'm at Green River, and somebody runs up and says, "Hey, Erik, here's a flyer for a job that I think is perfect for you." And it was a job for in Japan. Green River was starting a campus in Japan. And so I applied for the job, got an interview, and I really desperately, as a 20-year-old, couldn't think of anything better in the world than getting this job. I wanted it so badly. I wore a suit for the first time in my life for an interview. I'm now on campus. I'm walking towards the room where the interview is going to be held, and I started to freeze. I started to almost hyperventilate, and I was so desperate to get this job that my mind went blank. I literally stopped and took a giant breath and said to myself, "You know what? 2 months ago, I had a gun in my head. This is, in the big picture, not a big deal at all." All of a sudden, everything I wanted to say in the interview came right back to me. I walked in confidently, shook the hand, got the job, and went to Japan. So it's funny. I really think that one day allowed that confidence.
Yeah, and it sounds like it. And so you clearly have been through experiences that are very unique and very challenging, but have proven that you're a tough dude. You're a badass. But then I also read something that you think vulnerability is a key tool and something important to keep in mind. Can you share your thoughts on vulnerability and how that can be an important emotion or tool to anybody who uses it correctly?
Yeah, definitely. And this, I think, applies in life and it can apply in business. In business, it's a little more tricky, and I'll explain why. But particularly in life, I'm the type of guy who, at a store, if I need to find peanut butter, I'll walk every aisle before I ask somebody for it, and it's a fault to a fault. But I realized, asking somebody for help really does help and make things better. In my travels, it wasn't the time that I confidently went into a place and ordered a dinner or whatever. It wasn't a time that I confidently walked into a city, found a hotel, and went to sleep. It was the times where I didn't know where to go, when I didn't know what the menu said, where I didn't know if there was even a hotel in the village or the town. And I had to ask people for help, that I would meet the most awesome people. Sometimes somebody would say, I like in Africa, for example, I'll go back to that one. I'm asking somebody, is there a place I could sleep for the night? Geez, 50% of the time they would invite me to their home, and I would have not only a great place to stay, which might have been a hut with a dirt floor, might have been a house if it was in a city. I'd have meals that they would insist that they give to me, and it was just beautiful. I've met my best motorcycling friends when my bike was broken down and somebody pulled over to help me. And as they spend the 2 hours maybe it took to get my bike off the side of a freeway, we became friends and talked and ended up riding together later. And in business, I love to be in charge. But sometimes I realize that when I'm in charge, somebody else is in a defensive posture. And so oftentimes I'll say, I'll start to realize that, so I will take a different posture, and I will actually find something that this person that I'm they're in a defensive posture and I'm in an aggressive stance maybe. I'll totally relax and I'll think to myself, what do I need help with that they might be able to help me on? And I will ask them to help me in some capacity. And almost every single time it comes to that, once I've allowed them to help me, they feel really confident and secure in whatever relationship we've got. And it becomes more of a partnership, a working together to solve a problem, rather than me getting what I want and them not getting what they want.
And why what do you think is the psychological advantage of that, of giving somebody that leverage of being able to kind of prove that in at least one area they are either better at you or more advanced at you in at least that one area?
I think it's this, and I'm just thinking about this right now. I've never thought of it in this terms before, but I love helping people. In fact, my life ambition is to help people. I love the Zig Ziglar quote: "You can get anything in life you want as long as you help enough other people get what they want." I totally believe that. And I live by that. When I'm helping somebody, I feel good about myself. When I allow somebody to help me, I think that they're also able to feel good about themselves, and they're relating that good feeling to the context of me, particularly because I'm the person that they're helping.
Makes sense. Yeah, makes perfect sense. So if you could go back to your younger years self, maybe before you had gone off and experienced hitchhiking from London to Central Africa and having a gun pointed in your face and all of these different experiences that you've had, is there one piece of advice that you've learned over the years that you would give to, say, that junior college version of yourself who hadn't gone out and experienced the world in that way yet?
Brad, there are a few, and absolutely. One is definitely to write things down. I mean, there are studies shown over and over and over about how successful people write things down. And another one is meditating. This is also something that I kind of picked up from Tim Ferriss's work, where he studied billionaires and successful people. And one of the few things that he boiled down that almost all of them did was time every day for prayer or meditation. And so I meditate I do a guided meditation. It's exactly 15 minutes every day. And it allows me to really process the day. That 15 minutes taken away from my day is added back in time multiple times over, because that 15 minutes allows me to relax, filter through what's important, what are my priorities through the day. So meditation is another one. And don't get caught into the planning. I love reading books, and I find myself reading a business strategy book, and then I'll read a Tony Robbins book, and then I'll read a Brendon Burchard book, and then I'm going to read Think and Grow Rich. And then those books are absolutely amazing. But I think a lot of really smart people get caught up into thinking that they're working hard by learning the business strategies, by being motivated by these books. But until you do something, apply them, it doesn't mean anything. It's fun to learn it, but it doesn't help you grow to where you need to be. So what I force myself to do is, before I start every other book, I ask myself, have I applied what I've done what I learned from the last book yet? And maybe it's even one small thing that I'll try and apply before I go on to the next book. So I find that I balance the learning with the action, the learning with the doing.
No, that's really interesting, because I personally got caught up in that cycle myself for years when I first got interested in personal development and listening to podcasts and starting to read some of those books that you mentioned. And I would just binge on these things and try to consume as much content as I can. And then I realized I've learned a lot, but I hadn't actually been implementing it. So I know exactly what you're saying. And so it's great if somebody listening to this podcast goes back and binge listens all 90 episodes that we have. I would love that. That helps me. But what I really want for you is to take each episode and do this with any podcast you listen to. And like you said, Erik, any book, and really digest it and see, even if there's just one small thing that you can take and implement in your life, that will be a game changer by going just from consumption to actually doing and actually taking action on some of these things. So I'm so glad that you called that out, because that's a trap that I personally fell into, and I think it's one that is easy to get caught up in.
Yeah, Brad, I love that you went through that stage, and I love that you figured it out. So I've listened to quite a few of your episodes, absolutely love them. So I think you and I speak a similar language, but at the same time, you're coming from a different generation. What can you tell me about how can I communicate as a almost 50-year-old Gen Xer with millennials? Because I have millennials who work for me, and I have better and less. I have really good communication with some. I have less good communication with some. What are some magic bullets that you could give me to communicate better with millennials that I work with?
Well, I think that the one that I would call out especially is, and I don't think this is necessarily just a millennial aspect, but it's something that is more pronounced in our generation, is that we are more focused on the impact that we're making and doing work that's actually meaningful. So yes, a paycheck is great, and that's still plenty of motivation for a lot of us. I know for me personally, that definitely is. But even bigger than that is, what is the actual impact that the work I'm doing, what is it having? So whether it's in your businesses or whatever you might have, that whatever relationship you might have with that millennial, understanding what is their motivation, and oftentimes it's understanding what impact are they trying to make, or do they think they're making, or are they lacking in making? Because I know that, and I'll speak from my own personal experience, has been the reason that I've changed jobs, that I've left companies, things like that, because I looked at it and I looked at what I was doing, and there was no impact there. I wasn't growing personally. I wasn't impacting my own life. Maybe I was making a good paycheck, but I wasn't doing something that down the road would provide me with the experience to become a better person, a better business person, a better individual as a whole. Or the company or organization was lacking in making an impact. It was all about the profit margins and the bottom line. So helping to identify those things that are important to millennials, I think is the first step, and that can differ from person to person. So it's just kind of taking the time to understand where everybody's coming from. Does that answer your question?
I love that, Brad. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners have read Start With Why by Simon Sinek. And,
right.
And I think that actually speaks towards exactly what you're saying. So I think you're right. If I'd apply the why rather than the what and how to millennials more, that might help. And as you were speaking, I just actually gave a presentation, I don't know, a few weeks ago. It was just the 18th of December. And part of that, I said something similar to what you said, only I wasn't just speaking to millennials, but basically what I came up with was 100 years ago, I think people wanted to have a job to survive. 50 years ago, people wanted to get an education to have a comfortable job or career. Now, I think people are looking for meaningful experiences in education or job. The job that doesn't really matter anymore. Like you're saying, it's the impact that they feel that they can make that is the biggest driver. And I think you're dead on.
Right. And just in today's global economy, it's something that is so readily available that if you're at a company where you're not making that, having that impact, or you're not feeling like your personal morals align with the company's, then it's so easy to go out there and look and find somebody who is. I think that might be a piece of it, is just that you see so often these companies that are doing really amazing things. And if you're somewhere that isn't doing those things, or there's a lot of entrepreneurs listening to this, if you've created a company and it's gotten away from your own personal objectives and your own beliefs, quickly you can start to feel alienated from even your own company. And there's just, like we talked about, there's always so much content and information out there, and so many of these stories being told of the Tom Shoes of the world where they're making incredible impact, that it's easy just to realize there's something else out there and you're not participating in it.
Yeah, exactly. Another book that really affected me in 2017, actually, this has become a really big part of the book that I'm finishing that's going to be out in March. It's called The Power of Meaning. And basically, Emily Esfahani Smith, the writer, she says that meaning is made up of 4 pillars, and she has a lot of reasons why. And belonging is one, transcendence is another, purpose is another, and storytelling is another. And these pillars kind of build meaning into our lives. And the biggest thing that she kind of gets to is that to have a purpose, that it's something beyond ourselves. So if you, like, when I want to climb a mountain, that's a selfish goal to get to the top of the mountain. When I want to go to Thailand to become a better boxer, that's a selfish goal to become a better boxer. However, once I get to something beyond myself, like learning from the Thai people and wanting to help others, or learning how climbing the mountain is cooperation with others and how I can help others. So once you get to things beyond the self, I think it becomes a lot more important.
So a question on that.
A lot more meaningful, I should say.
Does that mean that you almost have to start with that selfish motivation of doing those different things to get to that level of selflessly helping others?
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you picked that up. I need my selfish goals. I think everybody, they always contribute towards good things peripherally, meaning as helping other people, etc. But I think not everybody, but a lot of people do a pretty good job balancing work and family, or work and but I think a lot of people, they leave out the self portion. I think it should be more of a triangle where you have work, you have family, and you have yourself. And that's neglected a lot. I think being selfish, going out and taking 4 days to climb a mountain away from my family, going surfing in the morning without my family sometimes, reading a book when, somebody wants to do something with me sometimes. I think we need to be selfish at certain points. And when we take care of the self, we're more open. We more easily can help other people.
I love that. So thanks for sharing that. Erik, is there anything else, and I'll give you a minute here, or an opportunity here to point people in a direction to find out more about you, but is there anything else that you want to share with the millennial audience, or ask of them even, before we sign off?
No, it was great speaking with you, and definitely, if anybody's interested in some of the photos of, I think I have some from Africa, definitely some interesting mountain climbing ones. Also I'm creating a landing page, which is ericseversen.com/millennial, for you guys. And there are there's pre-order for my book, which is coming out in March if you wanted to see that. There are a few other free resources on that. But no, I'm just really excited about what you've got going on. I think that you're really speaking to a crowd that really is engaged and going to helping the next generation be a generation of really positive entrepreneurs and earth changers. So I love it. I love what you're doing.
Thank you. And we appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I'll definitely have that linked up in the show notes at millennialmm.com/podcast. Erik, anywhere else online that you would suggest people go to find out more about you, or is that the primary spot where they can find everything?
Yep, ericseversen.com is the primary spot, and everything goes from there, from Language Link, my language school, and a lot of resources there, but that's the easiest way.
Perfect. And I know you mentioned that you have the book coming out in March. Is that going to be? Can people go learn more about that on the link there as well?
They sure can. In the book, basically, it's 42 narratives from my life, including the machine gun in my mouth, living with the Indians in South America, having a girlfriend in Paris, different narratives from my life. However, I've woven those into 4 categories of the pillars of meaning, and it's really explaining how we can contribute meaning to our lives better. If somebody feels content and meaningful and fulfilled, this book would be enjoyable, I think, because of the adventures. If they're going through life day to day, every day, the same thing, this might spark some interest to do a little bit more. And if it's somebody in life who's really struggling, thinking that there could be a lot more to life and I'm not finding it, it might allow you to find it within yourself. So I'm really happy about the book, and I can't wait for it to come out. And your listeners at ericseversen.com/millennial, you can get a 50% off. It's like a $14 book, 50% off if you order through the website.
Well, I just know based on the few stories that we touched on here today that the book's going to be filled with some pretty amazing things. So thank you for that generous offer, Erik, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Brad, for having me. It's been a great pleasure.